This is Regenerative Skills, the podcast helping you to learn the skills and solutions to create an abundant and connected future. I'm your host, Oliver Gaucher. Through their diverse range of publications, New Society Publishers' books explore topics that are at the forefront of creating positive change in our world. From regenerative agriculture and permaculture to social justice and eco-conscious living, their books cover a wide spectrum of subjects that empower readers to lead more regenerative and fulfilling lives. Now, whether you're a seasoned environmentalist, a curious beginner, or someone simply seeking inspiration and guidance on your journey towards regenerative living, New Society Publishers is here to support you every step of the way. Now, exclusively for listeners of this podcast, you can use the code SKILLS25 and receive a 25% discount on all ebooks at newsociety.com. That's all one word and lowercase, SKILLS25 on all ebooks. So level up your knowledge today at newsociety.com. All right, I'm back here again with Alex Stinson. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good. It's been a while since we talked. You've been quite busy.
I have been very busy, but I'm very excited to hear what you've got for us in our episode for today. So why don't you give us a little overview?
Yeah, so I got a chance to talk to Ripura Hewicke in Namibia about his experience kind of transitioning from a kind of conventional, someone trained in conventional agrobusiness into a farm manager for a nonprofit that's doing really neat kind of regenerative dryland farming. And I don't know how much you know about Namibia in terms of its dynamics.
Not enough. I know that it's got one of the driest deserts in the world, and that's most of what I know.
Yeah, Namibia's kind of history and landscape make it both very hard because it used to be mostly a pastoralist landscape, and colonialism fragmented land, as happens in many places. But also you add that very dry landscape, continued desertification, challenges in kind of economic development in parts of the interior, and not a rich history of kind of agriculture, settled land agriculture, other than the pastoralism. You have like a very complicated environment to try to set up a regenerative project. And so Ripura works for a nonprofit that does their main focus is on helping children get the things they need, education, food, family training, that kind of stuff. But they run businesses as near the schools in order to kind of help make the school more sustainable and have the community more invested. And so Ripura took over a olive orchard that they've been converting into a regenerative permaculture, tropic style tree, mix of trees, the olives that were already there, natives, and row crops. And he's doing this in a really community engaged way. So I was excited because he's taking like, an environment where there's still a lot of missing knowledge about like how to do this kind of, smallholder agriculture in a way that's, really good for community, but doing it well in a dryland environment. So that's what makes it really interesting.
It seems like there's a real opportunity there if there's not a long history of traditions of land stewardships when it comes to producing crops, to interject with possibilities that are not going to be introduced from the big ag corporations, from the big NGOs trying to get them to do the types of conventional cultivation that mostly gets pushed as progress in Sub Saharran Africa.
Yeah, and for me, it was really interesting because Ripura also had to do that unlearning, right? Like he was trained at the university to do agribusiness and in the conventional way, and it didn't work for him. Like he actually ran a farm originally that just wasn't a good business, and he actually did construction for a bit before coming back and learning from consultants how to do this more permaculture approach. So it was interesting to talk to him about that and to talk about how, it particularly in the environment where people haven't talked about this kind of small farm approach, that their NGO farm is kind of becoming a hub for training other people in their community, teaching people how to do their own gardens in their own houses, distributing seedlings at cost, basically, so that people can grow tomatoes. They can actually have, this nutritious diversity of vegetables in their lives, rather than just, what's available through kind of a large scale ag kind of system. So it's a great interview, and it was a recommendation from Thiang'o from Kenya. So thank you, Thiang'o. It was a great invitation.
So one more thing before we get started, how does this tie in with the theme of the interviews that you've been doing around this scarcity of resources in different parts of the world? Because obviously we're talking about the challenges of the climate and the lack of cultural context to creating cultivars. Where does the lack of resources fit in, and how are they overcoming that?
Yeah, I mean, we're working in an environment where there's not a tradition of doing this kind of agriculture. He's often having to kind of learn from others what the practices are and how to adapt them, and then experiment himself. And where they don't necessarily have like existing protocols, existing supply chains, that kind of stuff, he does have labor, right? He actually has the farm has the ability to pay for a few helpers, and then they can also work with youth and others to bring in, help when they need it. And so that they've actually been able to, trial and error. He talks once they had a little bit of money and they imported a bunch of seedlings from South Africa, and like half of them died, but because they weren't adapted for the soil and the context. Whereas they're doing a lot of work seeing, okay, what has adapted? How do we do that? And they're, developing seedlings for themselves, but then they're also selling them to the community because there's no one else supplying it. And so there's a real opportunity, like how they've built these little enterprises to really fit that context where there's not a lot of, examples or previous support, is quite interesting.
I love seeing examples of that. Oftentimes, scarcity really shines a light on opportunities, and it sounds like they're doing a great job of adapting to the needs of their community. I'm really excited to hear this. So what do you say we jump right in?
Cool. Welcome to our next interview in the series about smallholders adapting various regenerative practices in the global south. I'm so excited today to talk to Ripura Hewicke. He was a recommendation from Thiang'o, you might remember, from about a month ago, and he's based in Namibia and is going to talk a little bit about how they're building a permaculture system in the drylands there. So I'm so excited to get started. So can you explain a bit what kind of project you're building and why you're in this network of people working on permaculture?
Yeah, thank you, Alex, for having me. And for a little bit of context, I will take a longer route into telling you what we do here. So I work for a German NGO called Steps for Children, which focuses mainly on early childhood development. They run kindergartens and pre-primary schools across 5 centers in Namibia. And then the center that I work for has a garden. And this garden is intended to help the project, to help the main project financially, so that they don't always depend on donors for money to run the project. So the project has about 3-4 side projects that are meant to produce revenue to support the project, and the garden is one of them. So the garden started about 15 years ago. It was initially an olive orchard, which the founder thought would generate income once the olives start producing, obviously. And then that would now fund some of the operations with the Early Childhood Development Center. But then, unfortunately, the olives never bear fruit. And 5 years after that, they decided to just produce vegetables, conventionally, put up nurseries and work the land and put up irrigation systems and just produce vegetables for selling. That did pretty well for about 10 years. But then the project manager, Ms. Sonia Snyder-Waterberg, she decided she wanted a more organic, environmentally sustainable production system for the garden. And she got some consultants and experts on board to to try and figure out how do they make the transition from this conventional vegetable production to a more organic regenerative one. And one of the experts, a woman from Namibia, German descent also, she then looked at the olive orchard and said, man, listen, why don't we put this vegetable production in that old olive plantation there? I mean, 70% of the trees had died anyway, but then we had about 30% still standing, big trees, just not producing fruit. And then she said, no, let's take this production into that olive orchard and see how it goes. And that is what they did. So the trees are 6 meters apart, and we have vegetables beds between the rows, between the 3 rows, about 3 beds. One bed is 1.2 meters wide and 35 meters long. And then that is how it started, and that is what we are doing. We are producing organic food regeneratively and sustainably.
Well, and for the listeners who aren't very familiar with Namibia, it's a hard climate to do agriculture in, right? Can you describe a bit like what makes it a challenging environment to do these kinds of things?
Yeah. So what makes it challenging? I mean, we look at agroforests elsewhere, even in Uruguay where you are now, and it's this green, very wet environment, climates with high rainfalls and dense vegetation and thick layers of mulch. That is what we imagine, That is what we see. We don't imagine. We see that when we look at the videos on YouTube and elsewhere. What we have in Namibia is the direct opposite of that. It's a dry environment in the true sense. Sporadic rainfalls that last only for about 3 months. And then from there, it's dry up until the end of the year. We have very dry atmospheres, not very humid, very hot as well, maximum daily temperatures reaching 37, 38, 39 degrees Celsius sometimes. And then we also have very dry winters, obviously, but that have a regular occurrence of frost. So also quite challenging in that regard because you lose quite a lot when the frost hits. And water then becomes now the biggest challenge because the rainfalls are low, and then we have to tap into our underground aquifers and extract water from there for irrigation and for maybe drinking purposes and so on. So it becomes quite challenging.
And my understanding experience in Namibia was that I met someone once in South Africa that had been doing, was connected to a game reserve where they harvested the meat to make of traditional, meat foods and stuff. Can you talk a bit about like what that larger context of agriculture is in Namibia? It's these animal reserves and other projects. You're saying like a lot of large scale ag is something that's taught there.
Yeah. So definitely. So in the broader sense, the agriculture sector in Namibia obviously comprises of the vegetable and crop production. And then also we have the beef markets where farmers, commercial farmers and communal farmers as well, produce beef for the export market to Europe and so on. And then also coupled with that, we have the game, the wildlife, which is also sort of a niche market for the international market. But then a lot of farmers are also doing game farming, not only for the meat and the dry meats and so on, but also for the tourism. It attracts a lot of tourists. People want to come see wildlife. They want to come see nature. They want to see animals in their natural habitat. So a lot of farmers are also doing that. To take it a step further, it is given our climates and so on, it creates a very brittle environment because obviously anybody who's doing anything wants to do it to maximum capacity. And because of the semi-arid environment that we have, it creates a lot of problems in terms of environmental sustainability, in terms of ecological resilience, in terms of management, in terms of managing to sustain even the future generations. So it's quite a competitive, it's quite a competitive, intensive environment the farmers and the whole agriculture sector in Namibia.
Well, and can you describe kind of how that competition plays out? Do you have examples of where that kind of intensive work of the land is in competition with someone like yourself who's doing something more regenerative, or maybe where it creates kind of challenges?
Yeah, no, Alex, it creates a big friction, because one of the things we are doing, and this is something that I did not share with you also, is that here at Steps for Children, so we have in total about 20 hectares of land. I don't know if you convert that to acres, how much does that amount to? But then only about 2 hectares are under vegetable production, and infrastructure and buildings and so on. The other 18 hectares is just rangeland. It's just open land, grass and so on. So to answer your question now, I will say that because of this intensity of grazing and wanting to push out livestock into the market so that you can make money, people overutilize the rangeland, and it has been projected that over the next 20 years, Namibia will not be able to fulfill its international quota for beef in their export markets. So now we have a group of corporations and companies that import meat, that import beef from Namibia, and they want us to help them create a management template for communal farmers, because as we speak now, Europe only gets meat from commercial farmers, from Namibian commercial farmers. And in the next 15, 20 years, they won't be able to satisfy those needs, those export quotas. So these corporations want to see, they now ask themselves, why can't we then look into the communal farmers, the subsistence farmers? Because that is where most of the cattle that the commercial farmers sell to Europe, cattle that come from the subsistence farmer. A large portion of what they sell comes from subsistence communal farmers, and so they want to see if they cannot get meat from communal farmers. But then the problem is, because the rangeland is so overutilized everywhere, be it on communal land or in commercial lands, the rangeland is so overutilized. It is heavily bush encroached. I mean, we are originally a savanna grassland. That is our ecological classification. But now we have so much bush on these savanna grasslands that even animals cannot walk through into the rangeland to graze. So it creates a problem. So one of the things that we are doing now, we are trying to rehabilitate these 18 hectares that we have of open land, using the livestock of our neighbors in the community. So we go ask for their livestock to come graze our little piece of land. And we, through management and through observation, we decide, okay, now it's enough. They can go out. When the rangeland has recovered, we bring them in and so on. And then we observe with the community how the rangeland is changing over the years. And then by doing that, we also then now teach the community, because they are observing with us, they are looking with us, they are feeling with us. We are walking together through the rangeland, and we are making certain different observations. So it's sort of trying to change the paradigm from a competitive, intense cattle farming production to a more sustainable, regenerative, environmentally friendly production system. So for us, the friction comes in because we are now competing to convince people. Because my neighbor will say, no, man, this strategy of yours is going to take a lot of years. When will the rangeland come back to its original form? Other people are grazing intensely and they are selling off their livestock. And you are here telling me that, no, I must reduce my animal numbers. I must do this and that. Man, you're just wasting my time. So that is the challenge you face. And that is how, for us, it becomes the whole intensity, it becomes a problem.
Yeah, and it's the kind of thing where you can make changes on your small piece of land that you're restoring. And because your organization has respect in that community, you can kind of protect it in ways, but you have no control over the larger like landscape, like business practices and pressures on the farmers. Right.
Yeah.
And are these like how influential is that export market for how like local farmers make decisions? Do they feel a lot of pressure to try to make money that way?
Yeah, the problem with markets like those ones is that once there's a lot of pressure, because once you don't supply, once you don't meet the quota 1 or 2 or 3 times, then the importers start feeling like you're a waste of time, Why don't we talk to another country that also produces beef? So you want to keep that competitive edge. You want to be competitive. You want to be a player in the market. You don't want to be chucked out. So there is no time to slow down. Farmers are pushing on a yearly basis to produce the calves, to produce the oxen that are destined for the EU market. So there's just no time to slow down. So it creates a lot of pressure for them, and because of that pressure, they also push not only themselves but also the environment, and then it gets bad. It gets degraded, and then the whole system is out of balance, like it is now.
And is this system kind of a legacy of the colonial history of Namibia, or is it like something that's evolved more recently as the country has changed?
Yeah, no, I think the colonial history of the country contributes largely to how the environment is now. Because you see, when the colonialists came, they found open lands where animals roamed freely and where animals were in their natural habitat, and they were grazing how God intended them to graze. They would bunch together because of the fear of predators, and they would graze they would graze and walk and move, not standing. And they would follow the rains, So by the time, if they graze here, by the time they come back the following year, by the time they come back at this exact same spot would be after a full year. And that area would have recovered, that area would have regrown, the grasses would have recovered, it would have replenished, how do you call it? It would have grown, the grasses would have grown again and restocked their root reserves and so on. But when the colonialists came, they put up fences because they were claiming land as theirs. And these fences created a lot of problems. And the indigenous people were also pushed further away into other areas, and they were also fenced in. So animals would struggle to graze sustainably because they are surrounded by fences, So because of that continuous presence of animals, it created a lot of overgrazing. It created a lot of overutilization of the environment. And because of that overutilization, the system went out of balance, and these bushes came up. Because the bushes, here in Namibia, we want to fight the bush, we want to burn it, we want to cut it, we don't like it. But then we forget that the bush has an ecological function. The way the bush comes up here, you will notice that it is intended to rest the rangeland, so that animals don't go through, because it's very thick and thorny, So animals can't walk through to graze. So it is intended to slow things down a little bit, just so much that the rangeland recovers. But being the humans that we are, we don't have time to wait for Mother Nature to bounce back. So we cut them and we clear them out, and then the grasses started growing, but then still the original problem remains. So in my opinion, that is how the colonialists created the problem that we have today. Even though that now we can make a decision to reverse that is in our hands, and that is also in the hands of organizations like ours who are trying to change mindsets for people to come back to more sustainable regenerative farming practices and approaches.
Well, and so in an economy that's like so many people are looking at the landscape and saying this is for animals, right? This is for
Yeah.
a certain kind of market. Like, what does it feel like to do vegetable production? What kind of what did you have to either learn or teach or build as like a practice in your organization to like make it actually work?
Yeah. So, I mean, take for example, in the area that we operate in, the indigenous people from here, of which I'm also a part of, the Herero people, are predominantly meat eaters. They consume a lot of meat and they eat, and then they drink a lot of cultured milk. That is the diet since the ancient days. Obviously now in this modern world we consume other things, but then even if we have vegetables there, most Herero people will not go for it. They will go for meat. So it becomes a challenge to fit in, you know. Coming up with a garden in an environment filled with people who are pastoralists, who are cattle farmers, you feel out of place a little bit, because then nobody is doing what you're doing, and because of that, nobody is also willing to support you. So you are pretty much left alone to fend for yourself, and but then that also creates a lot of innovation and resilience. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And,
funny moving here to Uruguay. I feel like maybe the last 10, 15 years as I talk to Uruguayans has been a real change in the food culture. They've realized they have a good
yeah,
climate for like a large variety of vegetables, but the main food at all the restaurants is meat, potatoes,
yeah,
bread. And
yeah.
so when I bring like weird produce to my neighbors, they're always like,
Mm.
"Oh wow, what is this?"
The hell is
So
this?
how do you find that market? Like what are you doing to like build a culture of interest, and what are you producing? Like which produce do you guys
Yeah,
have? Um,
yeah. So maybe before I get to that, I will also say that one thing to take into consideration is that most of the vegetable farming, anything that has to do with food that is derived from plants, mostly happens in the northern part of Namibia. And then in the central parts, it's mostly cattle, sheep, and goat production, you know. And then in the southern parts, you find, because there's a perennial river there, and also it's a very dry area, you find some the palm date production and also table grapes. So we don't have a lot of gardening and crop production going on. We import 50% of the vegetables and fruits that we eat. So there's still a huge gap to fill in terms of internal food production. So what we now do, we try to contribute to fill in that gap. Even though our food is organic and not conventional, I mean, everything flowing around here is conventional produce, but we try to do it organically. And then how we try to engage the community and sensitize them to crop production is, we try to engage our community in as much as we can. We invite them to come to the garden. We invite various organizations, farmers associations, and farmers unions to come to our organization, to come to our production plot, to see what we are doing, and for them to also learn what we are doing and how we do it and why we do it. The biggest impact from that is, that I have noticed, is from our own community in Okakarara, where we stay, where our production plot is. They have bought into the idea of growing their own food, because that is what we advocate for. Not only food availability, but also food nutrition. Telling them that there are many different vitamins and nutrients and minerals in different food that you require as a human being for healthy development, you know. Not only meat and not only, let's say, onion and tomato. You need many other things. So now what we have started doing since last year is producing vegetable seedlings that we sell to the community for a very, very small price, because most people, when they think of the idea of starting a garden, they think, it's a waste of time, and then I have to plant the seed and then it doesn't germinate, and then now I feel bad and I don't want to do it again. So we decided to plant vegetable seedlings that we sell to the community for a very small price. I mean, affordable at least. And so people have been coming in to get our seedlings. We also sell them a vermicompost that we make at the garden, just to give some nutrition for their seedlings when they buy them. And a lot of people are giving feedback saying that, no, my garden is doing well. I had my first harvest of spinach. I had my first harvest of tomato. My onions are doing well. So the feedback is quite encouraging, and we intend on keeping it up and maybe also scaling it.
Well, you're kind of turning the local community into a garden in itself, right? You're taking the thing that you're doing, and I imagine it helps that you're educating the children at the school while doing the garden, right? Like how do you make sure that the kids get a chance to be engaged?
Yeah, so we are fortunate enough because you see there's quite a few kilometers between the big ECD center in Okakarara and the garden. The garden is about 7 kilometers east of Okakarara. So, but then we are fortunate enough, about 5 years ago, the project also started a small kindergarten for this community that is 7 kilometers away from the main center, because people would struggle to take their kids there. So they started a small kindergarten housing about 30 to 40 children. And what that allows us to do is that at least once a week, we take the children from the classes, the little ones, and we walk them through the garden. And under the supervision of ourselves, the garden staff, and also their teachers, take them through the garden, and then they are looking at these things, and then you would see them spark up when they notice that this is a carrot, this is an onion, this is a tomato. And then we also allow them to harvest some just to eat straight off from the plant. And that is how we are building that community. Because one of the things I've noticed, Alex, and this is very funny for me, I always think about it, is that a lot of kids do not know where food comes from. They have no idea. They think that food comes from the fridge or maybe from the supermarket, and that's it. But they don't know that it comes from the land, and that is what we are seeing our children here at the ECD learning that food is planted, vegetables come from the ground. Somebody has to plant it. You have to take care of the plant, and until you harvest. And I think we are starting from a very grassroots level in terms of creating awareness, because we are doing it with the kids also. So pretty cool.
Yeah, and I can imagine like having kids going home and saying like, I like carrots, can we have more carrots? Probably helps like convince the parents to pay more attention too, right?
Yeah, and that is what we also do when we are selling the vegetable seedlings. We paint a picture for the client. People, we load our vegetable seedlings and our compost, and we stand somewhere in the small town of Okakarara, and then people are passing by, and some are looking at what we have in the car, in our truck, and some are passing by, some are stopping and asking, what is this? What are you guys doing here? No, we are selling vegetable seedlings. No, I've tried that home garden thing and it doesn't work. No, but listen, these ones, they are ready to transplant. You don't need to plant and maybe wait for germination. You put it straight into the ground. And we also have compost here, so very nice compost that will make your seedlings grow very fast. And it's also an opportunity for you to teach your kids how to garden, and teach them where food comes from, because many kids do not know where food comes from. And then you start seeing a change in their demeanor, and they buy, and take it home. And then sometimes we do it for them. Sometimes they go plant themselves, but then you call after a month or so, and then you ask them, how's it going? And they're saying, no, it's good. My kids love the garden. They're always in there getting their hands dirty, weeding and stuff. So we are very happy with that.
I mean, is it challenging to kind of balance the opportunity that you're showing the families and the kids with the like economic conditions? Like, do people feel like they can buy produce from you or the plants? How does that fit in to the kind of people's mental model of how they use their resources?
Yeah, that is what we try to. That is the awareness we try to create. To say it is very expensive for you to go buy vegetables every day at the local supermarket or from the ladies, the informal vendors who are selling vegetables in the streets, because every day you are taking out money to go buy these things. But from us, you can take 3 days worth of money that you would use to buy vegetables and just buy seedlings from us and our compost, and you can make your own garden, and then you don't have to buy vegetables again, or at least not all of them. You cut your vegetable expenditure by even 60%, 70%, because most of what you consume you are growing yourself. But it's difficult because not everybody understands the dynamics of what that entails, and also not everyone buys into the idea of the home garden and what, because it requires a lot of, not a lot, but then it does require some effort. And many people, especially, I mean, you find, let's say, well-educated people who have like a lot of, not a lot, but they have some disposable income. They can just walk in and buy spinach, why go through the effort of growing it yourself? That is the mentality, and that is what you try to change through engagement with the community and the different stakeholders. But it's a slow process, but there's progress. We see more people coming and buying. We see more people asking questions. We see more people calling to inquire if you have certain vegetable seedlings, if you have certain what and what. So the progress is there, but it's slow. Still a lot of work to be done in that regard.
Well, and you were saying earlier that you were educated in kind of more standard agricultural stuff at university. Like, can you describe a bit more like what your education was like and how what you're doing now, this very community engaged, kind of slow, small production process, like what's had to change in that process, and how are you doing?
What led me here?
Exactly.
So Alex, when I did my undergraduate, it was both in animal and crop production, and it was standard production coursework, identifying nutrient deficiencies, identifying pests, and what to apply to as a remedy, and that is what we did. And our mentality was always a big production scale, 100 hectares of maize, or like 10 hectares of onion, things like that. Heavy chemical use, heavy pesticide, synthetic fertilizer use, and so on. But the one thing that my course had was a course called rangeland management. It was the only course in this conventional program that I was studying for that was a holistic module. Rangeland management, how to manage the rangeland. Grazing, when to graze, when not to graze, identifying species, what do you want to see in the rangeland, what are the so it was also, there were a lot of regenerative concepts that we were taught, like mulching and stuff like that. With animals trampling, they create mulch as they are stepping onto the dead plant material and so on, and the dormant plant material. So that course alone allowed me to do what I am doing now. So when I rid myself of the conventional life of production, I did my own thing for quite some years. I've been thinking about 5 years. Started my own garden, conventional also, but then it stopped. I stopped because it wasn't profitable and a lot of challenges that I faced there. Went into construction and blah, blah, blah. And then I just got a call from a former lecturer of mine saying, no, there's this garden where and they are looking for a manager. I referred you. And then they called me. And when I came here, I linked what I learned in rangeland management with what I was supposed to be doing here. Because what we did in rangeland management was just regenerative rangeland management, holistic rangeland management, looking at all aspects of production and linking all management actions and decisions with each other and trying to find out how will it affect the whole system as a whole. And that allowed me to be where I am now. And also, I mean, I had a problem with the whole conventional agriculture thing, because I used to think to myself, listen, we have now loaded a full truck wheat, but then this wheat is going to make bread, it's going to make pasta, it's going to make what? But then I know that there is some residue of chemicals and pesticides, herbicides in this produce that we are shipping off now. And that never really sat well with me. So when I got this opportunity to say, no, it's an organic regenerative system, I was excited, because finally I'll be getting to do something healthy. I will be getting to do something environmentally sustainable. And also that made me much, much healthier. I mean, spirit-wise, in my soul.
Well, and you said you tried to run your own garden before, and now you're like successfully doing it under the support of another organization. I'm wondering, like, what were you doing wrong first? Like, what were you not able to kind of adapt that now that you've had a bit more practice? And what does that learning process look like for you, I guess?
Yeah. So what happened was that, because I was trained conventionally, when I started my garden, I started a conventional garden, and conventional gardens need a lot of input, So because I did not have the financial resources to acquire all the inputs I need, whenever I was faced with a problem, I would always think, I have a pest on my crops. I don't have money to buy pesticides. So what can I do? I have lost, And that is what happened. So I would face a lot of challenges in terms of nutrients, in terms of pests, in terms of weeds. But then because I don't have the money to buy these synthetic products, I would not do anything. And I will just let the system die. I will just, okay, what can I do? I will let the crops eat until they finish. I have the pests eat. I will let the crop suffer from nutrient deficiency, not knowing that there is a whole nother side of the spectrum where you have natural remedies to everyday crop production problems. Unfortunately, at the time, that was not my mindset, and that is why I actually failed. So when I came here, through the guidance of some of our consultants, and also relying on my rangeland knowledge, and also just common sense and reading and self-learning, I'm in a better position now to, if I start a garden, to succeed with minimal input, in the long term.
Well, and like a theme that we've been having in this series on folks kind of operating in these creative conditions where you don't have resources, or you don't necessarily have access to supply chains and stuff that want you to do this, is that you really need to be able to self-educate, right? Like and you have to be creative and curious. I think, like, what changed for you to make it like empowering to go figure these things out, rather than, as you were saying, you're like very disheartened when stuff wasn't working.
Yeah. What motivated me, Alex, I think that my biggest motivation came from knowing that conventional agriculture is not healthy. I mean, it feeds the nation, it feeds large amounts of people, but it's not healthy for the consumer, and it's also not healthy for the environment. I think that was my biggest thing. And also, once I left my conventional career, if I can call it that, I also decided not to go back. I decided to myself, I'm not going to work in these kind of farms anymore. And that is why I decided to do my own thing. And up until I went into construction, and also a little bit of retail, selling clothes and stuff like that as an informal vendor. So I rid myself of that whole system entirely. How I got here was really just chance, to be honest, because I wasn't planning on coming to work for an organic regenerative farm. But the opportunity came, and I also thought, maybe it's time I also go back to my industry that I have spent so many years studying for in university. And that is how I came back here. And when I did come back here, so I found I found 2 consultants that were working, that were coming to the garden at least once a month, just to come see what the garden team has done, if they have followed instructions and if they have planted what they spoke about and things like that. And they also initiated me into the whole organic movement. And that prompted me, because I was also surprised at how much they knew, and also at how much the quality of information or knowledge that they had was, and I also strive to also educate myself more and more. So I started reading a lot, articles, and of course watching Dr. YouTube, and I mean, it built a lot in me, and it has put me in a position now to really, I mean, where we are right now, our garden is one of the few learning sites, not one of the few learning sites, but it's one of the few agroforest templates in Namibia. It's only a handful of gardens that are doing what we do. And because of that, we have a lot of visitors coming, wanting to come see what are we doing. And I think all that learning and that self-education and all that guidance from the consultants I'm talking about put us in a position to really be good at what we are doing. Yeah.
Yeah, and what kind of makes it hard for, this is very interesting to me, because I think, you were disenchanted, you walked away from it, and then you're like, no, actually this is still calling me back, right? I can imagine a lot of other young farmers in Namibia probably have similar experiences to you. They look at the food system and they're like, this is so disheartening. What do you think, like, from the people who do walk away from site visits and are inspired, what do you think is the thing that, like, helps them feel invested in trying stuff or learning themselves? Because I can imagine, and all my neighbors are like older than 60 years old, and they're probably gonna either die on the land or sell it to someone, and who knows if it'll go to the next generation. So I'm wondering, like, what's driving the curiosity especially for the younger people who maybe have to be trained in the industrial system because of that's what's happening in Namibia.
So there was a time when we had visitors come here, and it was a group, it was a family, it was a mom and dad and 3 children and the parents of the husband. They all came here just for a visit. And, when people come here, they look at all the chaos that is going on, because we have chop and drop systems, we have cover cropping, and we have green manuring, and all these things are happening. And you are explaining to them what you are trying to do. On the side, you are making compost, and people are looking at these things and wondering, how will I do this, But then I took them to, we had green peppers growing between one of the 3 rows, and I took them there because it was a very healthy green pepper plant population, I'm telling you. And these green peppers were nice and big, and they were shining on top, and sort of glowing, if you know what I'm saying. Just a very healthy green pepper, a very healthy green pepper crop stand. And I took them there and said, listen, you see these green peppers, look at how they are looking. And I took one and also opened it and made them smell, and some of them ate it raw, and it was so fresh and tasty and rich, And I told them, this is why we do what we do. Because what you guys are now holding in your hands, and some of you are taking bites from, is a healthy, non-chemical, non-whatever green pepper. It's organic, it's clean. It's a natural food that has gotten its nutrients from the soil, and the soil, we fed the soil through management, through chop and drop, through green manuring, through compost making and application, and all these many other activities that we do, trying to stimulate the microorganisms so that they can decompose the mulch, so that they can decompose the organic matter, so that they can decompose bits and pieces of whatever organic matter is in the soil, and they had an aha moment, like, wow, you have put it in a way that we have never heard, and so in terms of our visitors, we try to show them that aspect. Whenever they come, we take them to a section of to a section of our garden where there is active growth. Maybe there's carrots that are mature. We tell them, no, take some. You can take one each and just have a bite and see how it tastes. And they always have that revelation to say, this is much more flavorful, much more richer than what we usually eat. So in terms of let's say now the youth in Namibia, it's a challenge because sensitizing Namibian youth, Namibian people to organic food, we have a long way to go, because firstly, it's not taught in the tertiary institutions. There's no organic course in the tertiary institutions. You have individuals who are training people in holistic management, maybe, or in organic gardening, but we don't have a tertiary institution that can really take a large number of people and train them organic agriculture. So that is the first challenge. Second challenge is that because also we are, as I said, vegetable crop production is very sporadic in Namibia. It's not an intense activity compared to the beef, like the livestock sector. So people also don't have a lot of places where they can look and observe and get inspiration from. So it's quite a challenge. And I think even from us, Steps for Children, vegetable and olive plantation, we have a lot of work ahead of us to at least create awareness on the local level, and then the neighboring community and the neighboring towns, and then maybe slowly but surely we will get out there and start engaging larger audiences. Yeah, but it's quite a challenge, and I think the one of the ways to solve it is if really government also recognizes the fact that we need to start thinking about producing food organically, and then maybe they will channel more resources and more funds in that direction, and then maybe more people will have the opportunity to come across what we do.
Yeah, I mean, it in all of these interviews that I've been doing in this series, like, education seems to be a really big part of what people like land on. It's like, we have to train more people. And I'm wondering, it's how big is the operation? Like, how many people do you have working? And do you have that aspiration to be more of an educational hub?
Yes. So we have a half a hectare under active production, the agroforest now. And then we have a hectare under dryland production. I will be honest that we have only set it up. I mean, the previous years we would plant, once the rains come, we would plow the land and then get in some seed in there and stuff like that. Maize, watermelon, maybe cowpeas. But this year, we want to do it in an agroforest kind of way. So that is about a hectare that we have now cleared. We have not cleared everything. We have chosen rows where they are. So let's say we take the first row from the fence. We keep the trees and bushes and shrubs that are in that row, and then we clear the adjacent area. And then we choose another row, and then we keep those trees. So just like that. So what we are planning to do is, when the rains come, we will plant between those rows, and then we will develop those trees as the years go by through pruning and so on. And then those prunings will obviously be mulch and so on. And I lost track of your question now, but
I was wondering.
So we have half a hectare.
Yeah.
So in total, I would say 1.5 hectares under production.
And it sounds like you have a lot of little enterprises. Does it require a lot of different people doing the work, or is it just you?
Yeah.
Or how's that work?
Yeah. So also, Alex, one of the things we are trying to do here at Steps for Children is to create a production system that can be replicated. So we don't want to do something very big so that people lose sight of what we are trying to do, or so that people are discouraged. we want to keep it small so that any other person passing by can be inspired to also do the same. So yes, we are doing bits and pieces of everything. I mean, we have Speaks, for example, that we use as one of our regenerative principles, integrating livestock into the production system. We have them in a cage, and whenever we harvest, we move the pigs with the cage, and then with their snouts and hooves, they walk the beds, and they drop their feces and urine there. And then once they are done, we just sort of rake it down, and then we plant again. So we are doing a lot of things, but because we don't want to be too big, that is why we are doing it small, and we only have 5 people, permanent staff, that are working at the garden. And then we also have a lot of assistance from the community, because we opened our doors to the community to say, guys, because we have a lot of unemployment in Namibia. We have a lot of young people staying at home in the villages, not doing anything. And then because of boredom and also the whole economic situation of being unemployed, they end up doing not so clever things like stealing and stuff like that, and alcohol abuse, drug abuse. So we opened our doors to the community to say, guys, if you have nothing to do at home, come to the garden. You can work with us. You can learn how to garden. And then also when we knock off, you can get some vegetables, some spinach, some onions, and then you can go prepare something at home, because we were also surrounded by a very marginalized community, to be honest, and people are struggling economically to make ends meet. So also nutrition is a problem, So we have we have these community members coming. I mean, in any single day, we have about 5 to 6 volunteers from the community who are coming to help us. And when they knock off, they get some vegetables, and also they leave with some knowledge. And then we also offer them testimonials. Maybe if one day they are looking for work, we can offer them a testimonial that they volunteered with us for this long, and so on. So yeah, it's quite a small system, but we have assistance from the community as well, and to supplement our small team. Yeah.
Oh, but that's inspiring, right? Like I don't think that many people could work on that small of an operation, say here in Uruguay. It would just be too expensive. But what you're doing is, kind of meeting your economic situation with something that supports people in a way that shares education.
Yeah.
It connects you more with the community. That's really exciting.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I'm looking through the questions I sent you. Was there anything else you wanted to cover that we haven't talked about yet? What have we not talked about?
Yeah, no, there's one aspect that I thought would come up, and that is how crop production is done in the dryland areas. Most people, when they want to start a crop field, they will start by cutting off all the trees, clearing it, and then they put in a tractor with a plow, they turn the soil, and then they plant. And then because of our sporadic rains, unreliable rainfall patterns, it ends up a failure, because there wasn't enough rain, and then also you had cleared the land, the land was exposed to the elements, to temperature, to heat, to the wind, to maybe even rain, if it does come, washing away all your topsoil and so on. The wind also washing away all your topsoil. And then it discourages people, because then they don't want to do it again, because seeds are expensive. You have to hire a tractor, and then the rain doesn't come again. But we need to change our mindsets to a more regenerative, sustainable approach in terms of dryland production. It is possible to keep more water in the soil. It is possible to allow more water to get into the soil just through your management decisions, your management approach. That is why we started with the dryland agroforest that I told you just now. We want to teach people the importance of trees also in agriculture, in our production systems. We want to teach people that even in a dryland production unit, trees can contribute immensely to the yield of your production unit. even in a dryland context. So, I mean, trees will pull up nutrients, will pull up moisture from deep underground, and it will bring it, avail it to your crop that is on the surface. And even if you don't get, let's say, even if the rain is not that good, at least your crops are getting the little bits and pieces of moisture and minerals and nutrients from the trees. So we need to come to a point of understanding that trees and other plants, they do want to live together. We are always of the idea that things like to compete, but if you look into anthropic principles, that is not necessarily the case. Not always, Most of the time, things complement each other. Different plants complement each other. They have a mutually inclusive relationship, and they benefit from each other. So that is the mentality we need to come up with. And with our dryland agroforest that we have set up now, the trees in the tree lines are quite sporadic. But what we plan to do in the future is add more trees that can survive in that harsh environment without water. And then also any other tree that grows within that tree line, if it comes up naturally, we will allow it to grow. And then we will, through pruning and through management, we will train it to become a big tree. And then that tree will now have various ecological services to offer to your crop now that you are growing between the tree lines. It will provide some shade. Of course, as I mentioned, it will provide some moisture because the trees have longer roots. It will provide some moisture and nutrients that it draws from underneath, from the subsoil, bringing it up to the top for your maize and your watermelon and your cowpeas to utilize. So, I mean, that is what we need to be doing in these dry, semi-arid areas. That is the mentality we need to develop.
Well, and what I'm finding too as I plant out my garden is like the stuff that I eat every day, like the salad crops, do best under the trees, right? Because they're like partially shaded. The birds bring nutrient droppings there. It's easier for retaining the moisture, and so the plants take off, right? Whereas some crops like tomatoes or peppers do just fine out in the open area, and so it's really a interesting thing. While you're talking about trees, are you using a lot of native trees, or are you using a lot of introduced or kind of cultivated species to do that?
No, in the dryland agroforest, we are using native trees. Any tree that we'll be adding in there will also be a native tree. We want something that will not hassle us too much. Something that is adapted to the environment, that can easily adapt to the harsh conditions that we have here. So we are not going to be using anything exotic in that regard. In the olive agroforest, that is where we add a lot of different species. That is where we really push for diversity, because we are also to a very considerable degree, we are also wanting to create sort of a syntropic production system. And because of that, we are adding many, many perennial plants, perennial trees. We are adding a lot of annual plants, and stuff like that. But in the dryland, it's strictly indigenous.
And are there indigenous food crops that like you're integrating into the system, or is it mostly for biomass and nutrients?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of indigenous fruits that you can cultivate. We have, like in our region here, we have a few berries. I know of 2 berries that grow in the wild that you can put into the system also. But then obviously we will need to go get seed in the rangeland and then plant and then introduce into the system. But to be quite honest, we don't have natural indigenous fruit trees that you can literally pluck a fruit from and eat. We don't have that here. All the trees that we have, like even the indigenous trees that we have, are mostly suited for animals because their seed pods make a very good feed for animals, So maybe that is...
So it's So it's like the leaves and the
Seed nuts.
trimmings and the seeds are good for animals.
Yeah, but not really for human consumption.
Yeah,
Very,
I'm.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry we kind of didn't dig into that a bit more. Yeah, for me, it's been really interesting as I'm starting to plant out my system here in Uruguay. There's a lot of, nativized stuff from other parts of the Americas. There's a lot of like introduced species, and I do want productive stuff too, but it's always an experiment. Like every time I plant a tree, and I'm trying to plant trees that I can manage without irrigation. And it's really interesting to kind of see which ones take, which ones don't, and which ones are like good for my system. And it takes so much time. Like it's many years of learning and experience. Have you had any surprises on that as you've tried these syntropic practices? Like what's something that you weren't quite expecting based on what you learned elsewhere?
Yeah, no, I mean, with with production systems like ours, you always have a lot of surprises. You always have a lot of learning curves. You always encounter challenges that force you to rethink your whole approach to your management. We have had, I mean, because it requires a lot of labor to do these things. I mean, even planting and so on. And then labor also costs money. And then sometimes you also invest into planting stock that you import from elsewhere. There was a time we imported about 50 trees from South Africa, and I think 60% did not make it. Not because it was not irrigated, not because there was a problem. It just didn't fit into the system, But because we embrace syntropy, we realized that no, it did not grow because it was not supposed to grow. It doesn't fit into the system. Something ecologically, biologically doesn't sit right with that species. We had pomegranates, peaches, we had apricots, we had almonds, we had what else? Yeah, stuff like that. And most of them did not make it. But it was quite expensive to buy these three seedlings. But we made a loss, but we continue, we move. And so that helps you to really figure out what works and what doesn't. What do you want to achieve? What is your vision? And you adjust as you go on, and you try new things all the time, and it works, it doesn't work. If it doesn't work, you try to figure out why, and then you move on. If it works, then it's super, it's great. Everything is doing good. So it's sort of a roller coaster emotionally, because there are times when things are really doing well, but then there are other times when they are doing really, really bad. And sometimes you can save the whole situation, sometimes you can't. And it's sad to see effort going to waste, but unfortunately, those are the challenges that we have to face and deal with.
Yeah, I've made it a rule that I don't buy more than like 5 or 10 of a new type of tree if I don't know if it works yet. Because there's a couple of things where I'm like, theoretically I can grow it here. They do it well commercially all over the place, but like is it worth with one person doing a syntropic system? Probably not. Like pomegranates was one of the examples. Yeah, we learn from these examples. And also we kind of go ahead.
No, I just wanted to add something quickly, that with systems like this, doesn't matter how much money you have, it doesn't matter how financially strong you are. If you decide to always get your materials from elsewhere, you are going to lose money. It is much more sustainable, not only for you financially, but also for the system, to introduce species that are well acquainted with the environment already. I'm not saying only grow indigenous species. No, we have foreign exotic species that can establish well. And those are the ones that you need to identify and learn to identify. And those are the ones that you need to go for. And then also, if it is possible, grow them yourself and not always buy from people. Get seed, get planting stock, get planting material and propagate on site and grow it yourself, and then take it from there into the system. Because you can, let's say one example I can give you is mulberry. Our mulberry does very well here. Does very well because we grow it ourselves. We have a big mulberry tree that we make cuttings from, and then once those cuttings sprout and then they grow, and then once they are decently big, we take them into the tree lines, and they establish well. But there were times with this order of ours from South Africa that I told you about, there were a couple of mulberries in there, and they did not do well because they came into a new environment from nowhere, and they just did not, I don't know, maybe they did not, it was not in their genetics to survive our environment here, so that is, so better you grow your own seedlings, they grow into that environment, into the very environment in which they are supposed to prosper and establish. That would be my advice for food forest farmers and so on.
Yeah, like one of the themes across the series is everyone invests in their own nurseries, right? Because you realize really quickly when you're doing intensive plant systems that like growing your own, one, it's good for you, but it's also good for your neighbors, right? You can sell or gift the plants. Something I've decided to do in the last like year or so is double down on the number of figs I'm planting, because they're doing really well in my property, and I can, replant like 30 or 40 off my mother tree quite quickly. And I've decided that I'm gonna go find more fig varieties to put in the tropic rows, because they create good biomass. They're really resilient. If there's a drought, they drop their leaves, then they come back, right? So it's kind of these are the things you learn, but it really requires that like trial and error and kind of investing in your own seed stock, right?
100%.
So we're kind of approaching the end of the time we set aside. I'm wondering if you want to, highlight anything, platform any kind of projects you're doing, and who would you recommend that we talk to kind of continue this series?
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, as I said, we are trying to create awareness, and we have this vegetable seedling and compost enterprise that we are really pushing for, not only for income generation, but also to sensitize to sensitize Namibians in the long term. And we are also starting a very small nursery, tree nursery. We are pushing for 1,000 trees as a startup, making it diverse, different species, some shade trees, some fruit trees, some ornamental landscape trees. And so that is quite fresh. And some of them we have started selling, others we are still planting. So people find themselves here, they can definitely make a turn. Even if you one day come visit Namibia, you can come have a look at our nursery, and maybe you can take some with you and go put into your syntropic system if the government allows you. Other than that, there's a guy who's in the north of Namibia, in the Thiang'o region. He's a Namibian of German descent. Thiang'o. His name is Thiang'o. I forgot the surname. I can link you up with his contact details, and then maybe you can also talk to him. I can also reach out if he's interested. He has a very intense syntropic system. If you want to see a good example of syntropic agriculture in Namibia, you go to Thiang'o. He's doing very, very well, trying out many things, failing a lot, but also succeeding, finding loopholes to succeed. I think he's quite an inspirational guy.
That's great. It's always neat to find the inspiring people, and the more I talk to people working on syntropic systems and agroecology in the world, the more I'm realizing that there's really neat people trying stuff everywhere.
Yeah, no, it's a community. Yeah.
Well, it was so good talking to you. And do you want to leave any last words with folks before we turn off the recording?
Yeah, no, I mean, all I can say to the listeners and everybody out there is to say, I mean, we we are always anxious as citizens and as people, as global citizens. We are always so anxious when we hear of all these different things, what is harming us, what is doing this, and the environment is going in disarray, this is happening, things are going extinct. But people can be rest assured that really there are fellow global citizens that are really pushing to change the status quo, to change the paradigm, and to sort of reverse these detrimental, destructive course that the whole world is taking. I mean, in terms of any industry, But even for in agriculture, there are people who are really pushing, and we hope to reach you and catch you one day, and also convert you and become part of the movement. Yeah.
Well, I'm inspired. Thanks so much, Ripura. And yeah.
Thank you, Alex, for the opportunity. It was really a pleasure to speak with you and also to share the things.
Now, before we wrap this up, just remember that these episodes are only the beginning of the learning resources, design and coaching services, in-person courses, and interactive community that are available through Regenerative Skills. The Discord server is our free community where you can connect with other like-minded listeners, exchange ideas, stories, tips, and resources, as well as interact with me directly and quite a few former guests from this show. Our Instagram account @regen_skills is the best place to see the projects that me and the team are working on, both for clients and collaborators, as well as on our own properties. I'll also be announcing the certification courses, workshops, and gatherings that we've got coming up later this year. If you're interested in getting dedicated support for your own project, you can now schedule a free planning session with one of our team members through the request form on our website. You can also find all the links, show notes, and past resources there at regenerativeskills.com. We truly believe that no matter your experience, your knowledge, abilities, resources, or background, you can be a powerful force for regeneration on this planet, and we're here to help you find your path. So as always, remember to keep taking those little steps every day towards a regenerative future, and I'll be right by your side along the way.